All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going way, way north, to the top of the world actually. We're going to dig into why the Arctic, this massive frozen landscape, is suddenly turning into one of the hottest geopolitical spots on the planet.
And look, the source material we're drawing from kicks things off with this incredibly chilling prediction. The message is loud and clear. Stop thinking of the Arctic as this beautiful, empty wilderness. The new reality, it's shaping up to be a future battlefield.
So, you gotta ask, right? Why all of a sudden is this remote, frozen part of the world at the center of a high-stakes global game? Well, let's get into it.
Okay, so it really boils down to two huge things, both of which are happening because the planet's getting warmer. First, there's an absolutely mind-boggling amount of natural wealth up for grabs. And second, we're talking about new strategic shortcuts that could completely change how global trade works.
First up, let's talk resources. And honestly, the numbers here are just staggering. According to the estimates our source points to, the Arctic could be sitting on up to 30% of all the world's undiscovered natural gas and 13% of its oil. I mean, think about that. For centuries, this stuff was locked away under miles of ice. But as that ice melts, well, it's becoming reachable for the very first time.
And then there's the second piece of the puzzle, which this slide just nails. We're talking about brand new maritime highways. These Arctic shipping lanes could literally slash the time it takes to get from Europe to Asia. I mean, look at that example. Japan to Germany, the old way versus the new way. You could cut that journey almost in half. The savings in time, fuel, and money would be enormous. It's not an exaggeration to call it a potential revolution for shipping.
All right, so now that we know what everyone's fighting for, let's look at who's actually in the game. Our source breaks it down really nicely into 4 different groups or tiers of rivals.
Okay, so first up, you've got the Arctic 5. These are the big players, the coastal nations with direct access and historical claims. Think Russia, the US, Canada. Then you have the near-Arctic states, the neighbors, basically. But wait, it gets bigger. You've also got huge institutional players like NATO and the EU getting involved. And then there's this fourth group, the newcomers. Think of economic giants like China, Japan, South Korea. Countries nowhere near the Arctic, but who desperately want in on the action. Okay, so you've got all these players, a huge prize. What about the rule book? And here's the thing. The rules are complicated. In fact, that's putting it mildly. They're ambiguous, and a lot of them are flat out disputed.
The main document everyone points to is the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS for short. It's an agreement from back in '82 that was meant to be the legal framework for, all marine and maritime activities.
So under UNCLOS, a country gets what's called an exclusive economic zone, an EEZ. Basically, this gives them the rights to all the good stuff, the fish, the oil, the gas, for 200 nautical miles off their coast. Simple enough, right?
Well, not so fast, because here's where it gets really messy. The convention has this little clause. It lets countries claim an extended continental shelf, way beyond that 200-mile zone. The catch? You have to prove scientifically that the seafloor out there is a natural extension of your country's land. So what happens? A massive, high-tech scramble to map the bottom of the ocean, which, as you can imagine, has led to some huge overlapping claims. And this is exactly what our source material points to as the core of the problem. This quote says it all. This legal gray area, this inability to agree on where one country's claim ends and another's begins, that's the real tinderbox.
So for years, there was a kind of safety net. You had these international groups that acted like referees, They managed the tensions, they pushed for diplomacy. But this next section is about what happens when those referees leave the field. Because that's exactly what's happened. The whole system has pretty much collapsed.
I mean, you had groups like the Arctic Council, the Barents Euro-Arctic Council. Their entire reason for existing was to get everyone to work together, to cooperate on things like environmental issues, and most importantly, to keep things from boiling over into a full-blown conflict.
And this table just lays it out in black and white. Look at what happened. After events in Ukraine in 2022, the 7 other members of the Arctic Council basically hit pause on all cooperation with Russia. Russia, by the way, is the biggest Arctic nation by far. Then Russia pulls out of the Barents Council. Just like that. The main forums for talking things out, they're paralyzed. The referees have walked off. In a place that for decades was all about working together, that silence is, well, it's deafening.
Which brings us full circle, doesn't it? We've got this massive prize, a whole crowd of players who want it, a rulebook that nobody agrees on, and now the mediators are gone. So what happens next?
This isn't just theory anymore. This is real. Right now, Russia, Denmark, through Greenland, and Canada have all filed official claims with the UN, and they all overlap. They're all claiming the same huge chunk of the seabed based on how they each interpret this one undersea mountain range, the Lomonosov Ridge. And get this, all of their claims meet right at the North Pole. It doesn't get more symbolic than that.
So that leaves us with one last, pretty unsettling question. With the rules broken, with all these resources on the line, is the Arctic about to become the world's next great battlefield? As the ice keeps melting, are we watching the very first moves in a conflict driven not by old grudges or politics, but by the changing climate itself?